Okay, picking up where we left off on page 278, we're in the middle, we're on step 3 of this software acquisition process. Step 3 is when you actually evaluate the alternatives. So, look at your users, doing some application testing. Perhaps they have some demos that you can have to kind of look at those things, kind of make sense. Any benchmarking data that they have, if they say that we can do so many transactions per second on the database, like, okay, fine, let's compare those with the other vendors. And then, of course, match each one of these things against the RFP to see they actually did do their homework and did actually respond with something that was, appropriate for what you're asking for. Step 4 on page 280 talks about performing the cost-benefit analysis. We went through that. So identify and calculate the TCO for each one of the options. If you're purchasing software, make sure you find out if you're buying it outright or you're doing a license. Even when you hire someone to outsource and build something for you, if you're having a company build custom software that's just for you, you could, at the end, say, I want the rights to this application. And they'll say, okay, and here's how much it's going to cost. Or you could say, well, you just build it for me, and they'll say, we'll keep the rights at our end. And you go, okay, and it'll probably cost you a little bit less. So not just commercial software licensing, even when you have to consider those issues when you're having it done. Okay, and match, and of course you might have a supplemental maintenance agreement. I know, for example, that companies like Oracle used to make the vast majority of their money not from selling you databases, but selling you annual maintenance contracts for the database. It's not quite so bad now, but it was a pretty big racket at one time. Okay, continuing on step 5, they talk about prepare a recommendation. So you evaluating, describe all the alternatives together with the cost, the benefits, advantages, and disadvantages of each one of the options. You should have a formal systems requirement document. And more than likely, you're going to deliver a presentation. You probably have a report, and you probably get up in front of a boardroom and talk to them about, okay, here's all it is. So the next one is step 6 is when you actually implement the plan. So obviously the implementation plan depends on what decision they made, duh. And before, of course, the new system comes online, there's an awful lot of things you have to do. Normally what we do is you develop a transition plan or an implementation plan that talks about, whether I'm going to do just a complete cutover, we're going to move along and then just stop and then just go to the new system. Or we're going to do a phase transition, or we're going to do parallel for a while. Lots and lots of options designed to not disrupt your organization. Okay. So let's go through some more of that, talk about the systems requirement document. We mentioned that several times. Let's just go through it. So it contains the requirements for the new system, describes the alternatives that were considered. Now, it's not like here's our recommendation. This is the final document, but it's okay to say we chose this, we wanted to do this, and we considered boom, 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 boom. So you can throw in the alternatives, but you don't need to defend your decision because this is your decision. You've already made it. All right. It looks like a contract and it becomes a contract. When I'm done with this thing, this says, this is what I want. And you can't come back later and fuss at the vendor for not providing what you want if it wasn't in the requirements document. Well, I wanted voice recognition in there. It's like, I'm sorry, that wasn't anywhere in the specifications that you gave me. Not anywhere. There's no way I'm going to provide you voice recognition feature for this new piece of software unless, of course, you give me more money. Okay. And it would be very helpful if it was kind of well organized and formatted, so that, just like a contract, so that it's easy to follow and that no one is kind of bogged down in the details. If you're using highly technical terms, you might end up with a scenario where you think you're talking to the vendor and he's nodding his head saying, yeah, we can do that. And then later you find out he had no idea what the heck you were talking about. So make sure these things are easy to understand. Okay. The presentation to management, they give some cool examples on page 282 on how you can do that. You know, summarize the primary recommendation. You know, explain how the evaluation team got to where they got. Allow time for discussions and questions. I mean, this is common sense stuff. And then obtain a final decision. Hopefully write it in there. Or if they say, well, no, we'll get back to you, you know, try to push them for, okay, by next week we'll have an answer. Okay, so this presentation to management is, of course, crucial. It's the step that gets you from where you are to actually putting the system together. Which is about what we talk about, the transition, you know, preparing for getting out of the system analysis phase into the development phase. And we've mentioned this before, those logical models that we created to kind of help us with our description of what the system will do are going to later go to a physical model to tell it how it's going to do it. So all those tools that you put together, all those little goofy diagrams that you put together, you know, back in the previous chapters will actually be very helpful starting in Chapter 8 and going forward. Alrighty, let's go over the chapter summary on page 284 just to make sure we didn't miss anything. So, new trends in this business is software as a service. So yeah, I'm probably going to ask you like a test question, give me a scenario where software as a service makes sense. Or I might give you one that says, where does software as a service not make sense? Okay. Traditional systems, usually land-based, usually well-known requirements. You know a lot about your own PCs. You know what's installed, what's not, you know what's available. Web 2.0 is a buzzword that basically means I now, as an end user, I now can participate, essentially. Companies that create in-house systems. You can have commercial software packages as alternatives, and the systems analyst role depends on that development strategy. The most important factor for choosing a strategy is probably the total cost of ownership. Often it will be speed. I need a new system, I need it now, and it's like, man, I'd love to do it in-house, but I don't have the time. You know, I got a great group of guys, but they're all committed doing other things. And so if you want this thing done in 3 months, we have no choice but to go outsource. So either TCO or time. TCO is typically the higher of the two, but occasionally it'll be a time constraint. And talk about financial tools. Yep, you got payback analysis, ROI, you know, net present value. Those kind of financial things that businessmen would appreciate. So, you know, if you have a businessman who's your CEO of your company or whoever is the decision maker, throw in those financial terms that they like. Otherwise, they're going to ask you, they're going to say, well, that's all fine and good, but how long is it going to take for this to pay for itself? And you go, So go ahead and anticipate that. All right. So the software acquisition steps, you know, evaluating system requirements, considering web-based issues, potential software vendors, or outsourcing, evaluate alternatives, cost analysis, prepare a recommendation, and implement a solution. Alrighty, and then the last part of the summary talks about this system requirements document. You know, details all the requirements and the constraints, recommends the best solution, and provides the cost and time estimates for any type of future development. And basically, it's the framework that you're going to use for going forward. So, that's the end of Chapter 7, and I guess we'll see you again in just a few for Chapter 8.